When I first heard about Antonio Brown's helmet issues, I didn't really feel like it was worth taking into consideration. Because how hard can it actually be to find a helmet that fits your needs? As a sports bettor, I was unconcerned. Then as more information began to come out, and having a more complete picture of the ridiculousness going on here, it's finally time to discuss it. So let's start at the beginning. After being present for OTAs and reports coming out that Brown and Raiders starting quarterback Derek Carr were building chemistry, AB was living up to the hype. His work ethic was being talked about, Gruden was making happy faces, and all seemed well in Raiderland. Then word came out from Raiders camp that Antonio Brown was suffering from a form of frostbite that was caused by Brown's use of improper footwear in a cryotherapy chamber in France the month before. Other than the weirdness of deciding to go to France to have cryotherapy treatment, there has literally been no further comment, as AB's agent Drew Rosenhaus was quoted as saying, "They can't divulge any information as to the cause of the injury to the player's feet because legal action against the cryotherapy company involved could be coming in the near future." While I'm not a lawyer, from a basic legal perspective, given that the injury happened in France, and whatever company/owner of the unit would be a necessary party in the lawsuit, the claim would almost certainly have to be filed in France. And let's not forget, Brown failed to wear proper footwear. We all know who Antonio Brown is. He's about his money, and the potential cost of filing a lawsuit in France is a non-starter, and I would be more than shocked if any lawsuit was ever filed. Moving on. Those pictures of Brown's feet are nasty, and it made total sense that he needed time to heal, whether the situation was his fault or not. Fast forward a few days after the frostbite news first came out. At this point is when the first news over Antonio Brown's issue with his helmet came out. The helmet in question is the Schutt Air Advantage. This is a helmet that was completely discontinued in 2014, with the company explaining, quote, "We discontinued making the helmet 3 years ago because current helmet technology had moved past it. The Air Advantage was the last varsity helmet made by Schutt that featured traditional foam padding. That material, which is used by most other helmet manufacturers, does not perform as well as the TPU cushioning we now use in all our varsity helmets. TPU, thermoplastic urethane, cushioning absorbs significantly more impact across a wider variety of temperatures than any other helmet on the field. Third-party testing by an independent certified helmet testing facility has proven that 3 years in a row. The Air Advantage had lived out its useful life as a product and was discontinued when something better was developed." End quote. So by switching to a new helmet, Brown would be making himself safer on the field. But the issue, according to Antonio Brown, is that the new certified helmet protrudes out and interferes with his vision as he tries to catch the football. Just put this into perspective. Here is a visual representation of all of the approved helmets. Now, I don't understand why Brown can't just sign a waiver that releases the NFL from any and all liability should any injury occur and let him wear the helmet he likes. But after the recent lawsuits from former players suffering from CTE, the Aaron Hernandez and Junior Seau incidents, and many others that have undoubtedly gone unreported, the NFL doesn't want the lawsuits or the bad publicity. And so the Antonio Brown helmet saga begins. NFL.com and NFL Network analyst Michael Silver sent out a 20-tweet firestorm, which opened the floodgates for all of the sports media talking heads to give their opinions. Silver tweeted that even before the frostbitten feet story came out, Brown had already alarmed Raiders coaches and teammates by railing against the NFL's enhancement enforcement on helmet regulations, a policy change which will likely force the star receiver to switch to a new model. Silver goes on. Brown's vocal resistance to the mandate, both during OTAs and shortly after his arrival in Napa, California for training camp, has contributed to a disconnect with the team. His continued frustration surrounding the situation has created a buzz among teammates and coaches. Now, before I go further, let's make it clear that negative buzz is rarely a good sign. Just look at recent history. When Blake Bortles' poor play was causing buzz within Jacksonville's defense. When Odell Beckham Jr.'s public criticism of Eli Manning and the play calling of the New York Giants caused buzz within the Giants' locker room. or when the disconnect between Ben Roethlisberger and Antonio Brown caused buzz in Steel City. Do you see a pattern? All of these players are no longer on their respective teams. Silver has also stated that Brown's pushback against the NFL's helmet policy began in May, when the receiver was informed by the Raiders that the NFL had officially eliminated the one-year grace period for certain helmet models, including the one worn by Brown, which had fallen short in laboratory testing for head impact severity. The NFL's Executive Vice President of Health and Safety Initiatives was quoted as saying that any team found to have known about a player wearing a banned helmet or to have facilitated the use of one would be subject to league discipline. So as a sports bettor, you have to recognize that this isn't just an issue for Brown. This could be damaging to the Raiders organization as a whole. Silver goes on to explain that each team's equipment manager had been instructed to remove all banned helmets. All of this was conveyed to Brown at the team's training facility a few days before the start of Phase 3 OTAs. Phase 3 OTAs are the first time players are allowed to wear helmets during on-field workouts. However, when Brown showed up for the first practice, he requested his old helmet. After being told he'd have to wear an approved model, witnesses say the wide receiver loudly voiced his displeasure, complaining quarterbacks such as Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers were not being subjected to the same scrutiny. Brown then left the facility in protest. I'm sorry that I have to keep breaking this down, but there's a lot to unpack here. So before he ever even had to put a helmet on, Brown was told that he would have to find a new helmet. He was given fair warning beforehand. Then when the day comes and it's time to put on a helmet, Brown requests his old helmet, and when told that he can't wear it, throws a loud tantrum and leaves the field. This is classic childlike behavior. I might expect this type of behavior from a middle school student, but this is a 31-year-old professional football player. Now, my goal here isn't to criticize AB, but facts are facts. The story gets weirder. So after Brown refuses to wear the new helmet, implies that Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers don't have to wear the new helmet like he does, and then leaves the facility and his teammates without practicing, a Raiders coaching staff member actually finds video footage of Aaron Rodgers during the Green Bay Packers OTAs wearing an approved model helmet, and they text the video to Brown. This one piece of information should tell you how important the Raiders feel Antonio Brown is to their success or failure in the 2019-2020 season. The next day, Brown shows up to practice, takes the new helmet without protest, and practices with the team. A week or so later, Brown tries to sneak his old helmet onto the field by actually painting the Raiders' silver and black design on his old Pittsburgh Steelers helmet. What makes this even more ridiculous is the fact that the paint job wasn't even good. All reports indicated that the helmet was shoddily painted silver and black. Brown was quickly told the helmet wasn't allowed. He took a new helmet, and there were no further helmet-related incidents until training camp in Napa. So this man actually took the time to paint the helmet. And judging by all reports, he may have even painted it himself in an attempt to sneak it past the coaching staff in practice. While the level of disrespect is astounding, consider the effect that this has on his teammates. Not what you hear in the media, but what his teammates are actually thinking. None of this is a good sign for the Raiders' win total, but more on that later in the video. As soon as training camp began, Brown again tried to sneak his old helmet onto the field, with team officials again telling him to remove it. To further complicate matters, Brown has been reported by anonymous teammates to have multiple tablets and phones with him in team meetings, checking his bank account and liking photos on Instagram. From the majority of sources that I checked, the bank account thing isn't really a big deal. But the frostbitten feet, the helmet, and storming out of practice is a big deal. You would think that that's the end of the story in the video, but astoundingly, that's just the beginning. Before I continue with the facts surrounding Antonio Brown and the helmet, if you're enjoying the video and you feel like you're getting good information that can help you gain an edge over the sportsbooks and make smarter sports wagers, make sure and subscribe and hit the notification bell so you can stay updated with the latest sports betting content from me, professional sports handicapper Alpha Omega. Also, make sure and click the link in the description of the video, check out my website, and sign up for a sports betting package. If you think I'm digging deep into the Antonio Brown saga, I literally break down sports information and make my living based on that information all day, every day. I take all of the sports data I can find, I factor all of that data into mathematical betting models to make my picks, and I send you the same picks that I bet on myself. I have packages for every level of sports bettor, from a beginner who is just coming into the sports betting world to the expert bettor who just needs that extra edge to take them to the next level. Make the smart decision and sign up with a professional today. So as Antonio Brown continued to be a non-participant in training camp, news came out that Brown had told the Oakland Raiders he will not play football again unless he can wear his old helmet, essentially threatening to sit out unless he can wear the helmet. Brown also filed a grievance with the NFL, asking to be allowed to continue wearing the helmet. At this point, the Raiders played their first preseason game against the Rams, which the Raiders won 14-3. And after the game, Coach John Gruden was asked if he thought Brown would be taking the field soon.
And I hope so. You know, there's been a lot of reports out there. I can't say I agree with all of them, certainly. But I support this guy. You know, I think that's what needs to be said. I don't know what anybody's writing or what anybody thinks, but this foot injury wasn't his fault. You know, this was a total accident. It really wasn't his fault, and it's a serious injury. I know some people are smarting at it, but it's really not a laughing matter. The guy was hurt. He was innocent. He didn't do anything wrong, and the helmet thing is a personal matter to him. You know, he has a strong feeling about what he's worn on his head, and we're supporting him. And we understand the league's position as well, so we're in a tough spot. And we hope Antonio is back here soon because he's exciting to be around. I'm excited. I got some plays for him. I hope we can start calling him.
When asked if he felt that Brown may actually sit out if the helmet issue couldn't be resolved,
I'm not going to speculate. You know, I have a lot of confidence that he's one of the premier competitors I've ever been around. And I got a feeling he would play with no helmet. It's how much he loves to play. But I'm not going to put words in anybody's mouth. We're going to support him. And whatever his decision is, we'll stand by it, but we're confident that he's going to be a huge factor for the Raiders for years to come.
Now, this was blown out of proportion by the mainstream sports media as Gruden supporting his player. Regardless of how Gruden actually felt at the time, what did anyone expect him to say at that point? I'm tired of Antonio Brown already, and it was a horrible decision by myself, the GM Mike Mayock, and the owner Mark Davis to get this guy? He had no choice but to say what he said, and I would throw out all of Gruden's comments here because they don't mean anything. It's just coach speak. Now, while all of this was going on, the grievance filed by Brown and the Raiders playing without him, Antonio Brown took to Twitter in an attempt to find a helmet and offered a signed practice-worn Raiders helmet in exchange. Now, I think he may have had more offers if he offered $10,000, but remember, Antonio Brown's number one priority is Antonio Brown's money. As we all now know, Antonio Brown lost his claim against the NFL. Brown posted this on Instagram in response to the denial by the arbitrator. At around the same time, Brown's Twitter request resulted in Brown finding several Shut Air Advantage helmets that had been made within the last decade, including an Air Advantage made in 2014 for a film. Brown then sent the helmets in for testing. The National Operating Committee on Standards for Athletic Equipment, or NOCSAE, I'm not saying that again, by the way, okayed the 2010 model Brown had acquired, but the NFL rejected it. So basically, the national body that dictates standards for athletic equipment said the helmet was fine, but the NFL then took the helmet for a separate independent evaluation, and the helmet failed the evaluation. At this point, there seems to be a bit of hypocrisy on the part of the NFL, as Brown had found a loophole in the NFL helmet rules, and then the NFL still failed the helmet. To make matters worse, the NFL found its own 2011 version of the Shut Air Advantage helmet. The NFL tested it, and it did not pass. The NFL was quoted as saying it believes that any and all Shut Air Advantage helmets made within the last 10 years would also not pass. So the NFL is basically not going to allow Antonio Brown to wear a Shut Air Advantage helmet, regardless of what year it was produced. So now we are coming up to current events. On Sunday, August 18th, Brown again didn't participate in practice, despite now being healed from the frostbitten feet that have sidelined him for most of training camp. The Raiders finally seem to have had enough, which is going to help decide how to bet on the Raiders' season win total, and also the Raiders as a team moving forward. Oakland Raiders general manager Mike Mayock told Antonio Brown through a brief exchange with the media,
you all know that AB is not here today, right? So here's the bottom line. He's upset about the helmet issue. We have supported that. We appreciate that, okay? But at this point, we've pretty much exhausted all avenues of relief. So from our perspective, it's time for him to be all in or all out. Okay? So we're hoping he's back soon. We got 89 guys busting their tails. We are really excited about where this franchise is going, and we hope AB is going to be a big part of it starting week 1 against Denver. End of story. No question.
Brown's agent, Drew Rosenhaus, said last week after Brown returned to Raiders training camp that they found several helmets and were waiting formal approval. Brown took part in pregame warmups before an exhibition game in Arizona on Thursday night and took part in a walkthrough on August 17th, which seemed to calm the situation down from the outside. However, with Mayock's comments, I think this issue is going to come to a head, and the Raiders are not interested in dealing with Antonio Brown's ridiculous much more. What makes this even more interesting is that Brown has sent one of the new helmets to the Independent Biokinetics Incorporated lab in Ottawa, Canada, for testing, with results shared with biomechanical engineers from both the league and the Players Union. While this may sound promising, a person familiar with the testing said on condition of anonymity that the helmet was no different than the 2010 version that had previously been rejected, and both the league and the Players Union determined it wasn't safe enough to be used. So at this point, the Raiders are fed up, and Brown is still unwilling to adjust to the same changes that every other player has adjusted to. In terms of the betting on the Raiders, there are a few ways this could play out. Currently, the Raiders' win total sits at 6, with the under at -125 and the over at +105. If you feel like Brown is willing to sit out this season, I would bet the under right now. I do not feel that way. Remember, like I've been saying throughout this video, Antonio Brown is about his money. I feel the chances are so slim that Antonio Brown sits out the season that it really isn't even worth discussing further. However, this is the bet that I would consider making. When Brown eventually returns, I expect the Raiders to win 2 of their first 4 games. At that point, I would also expect the win total to go up to at least 6.5, and you may even be able to find a 7 if you shop around. As soon as you see either of those numbers, that is when you want to place at least double your standard unit wager on the under. The Raiders rank first in strength of schedule this year, and early victories for the Raiders will drive that win total up, and you'll be ready to fire when it does. Now you know all that there is to know in the Antonio Brown helmet saga, and you actually received useful information that is rarely talked about in the mainstream sports media because they are too busy giving their useless opinions to talk about the facts. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will be doing my best to get multiple videos out every week. Remember, if you want to learn more about betting on sports like a pro and gaining an edge over the sportsbooks, start now by hitting the round subscribe icon so you don't miss anything. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.